Welcome back to A-Level Biology. We started off on the first topic in A2 or Year 13, and this is energy and respiration. The first video, we looked at the 4 stages of respiration, aerobic respiration, that is, for that matter. And we said there are 4 stages of respiration, and we listed them down. Today, we want to look at the first stage of aerobic respiration, which is glycolysis. Now, to remind ourselves, we said the equation that we know, which is the equation that shows glucose plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, is what we're going to explain what happens in the first stage. So looking at this glucose molecule here, is the one we begin with. And the process of glycolysis is basically the splitting of glucose molecule. As glucose molecule, we split it down into 2. So it comes from the word lysis. Lysis means to break, and glyco to refer to the sugar molecule. So we're breaking down the sugar molecule. In this case, our sugar molecule is glucose, and this is a string of reaction, not just one reaction, but several reactions that helps us to break down the glucose molecule and end up with a compound called pyruvate. Okay, so we'll end up eventually with the end of this stage produces a molecule called a pyruvate. And this pyruvate is energy rich, and we want to see what the process is. So first thing that happens is in the process of making ATP, we will have to spend some ATP to help us break down the glucose molecule. So in the first stage, we start with the glucose molecule that is, and we know a glucose molecule is a 6-carbon molecule. So what we do in the first stage is we take ATP, all right, 1 molecule of ATP, and we phosphorylate our glucose molecule. That is, we add phosphate. So we add a phosphate, okay? So once we add a phosphate group to it, it no longer now is referred to as glucose hexose sugar, which is 6-carbon. It is now referred to as fructose phosphate. And the phosphate here is the phosphate we just added. So now we have the molecule fructose phosphate because of the addition of ATP or 1 phosphate group. And then we get another ATP molecule, and we again phosphorylate the fructose phosphate. And now the fructose phosphate will have 2 phosphate groups in them. So this is plus another phosphate. And it is no longer now called glucose phosphate. It is fructose phosphate is now called fructose bis or bisphosphate, meaning 2. It has 2 phosphates, and the phosphate are in the position 1 and 6 of the carbon in the fructose. So our new molecule now is fructose 1,6, showing the position where the phosphate is, bisphosphate. Then what do we do with so we've so far expended, or we used up 2 ATP molecules. So that's 2 ATP used so far to end up with this molecule called fructose 1,6. What do we do with this fructose 1,6? It goes through a process that splits it into 2. So remember, it's a 6-carbon sugar. Okay, now it is split into 2 molecules of a compound called triose phosphate. Now remember, it was 6 carbon, so if you split it into 2, you'll end up with a 3-carbon sugar, 2 3-carbon sugars. And those 3-carbon sugars, one is called triose phosphate, and the other one, of course, triose phosphate. So what do we do with this triose phosphate? We then oxidize it. And when we say oxidation, we mean a hydrogen is removed from this molecule. Okay, and because there are 2 triose phosphate molecules, in each of them you're removing 1 hydrogen. It therefore means 2 hydrogens are going to be removed, and the process is called oxidation. The process of removing a hydrogen is called oxidation. Okay, so what exactly is oxidizing? A molecule called NAD. Okay, and since we have so each triose is oxidized using one NAD molecule, and since there are two triose molecules, then we need two NAD molecules. They will accept this hydrogen, and when they accept the hydrogen, we then say NAD has been reduced. Okay, so before it was reduced, it didn't have hydrogen. Now we give it two hydrogens. It is now, we have ended up forming two reduced NAD molecules. So two reduced NAD molecules. So, and then what happens in the process of doing this? So reduced NAD is what we have now formed. And then as that is going on, the same trials in the process of this oxidation, they eventually ends up giving up two ATPs for each molecule. Okay, so we have two ATPs being produced in this process, in this reaction in between. Don't worry about what goes on to produce, just know two ATPs are going to be produced. For your syllabus, that's what is important. And then after this first step where you produce two ATPs, then there is a second step that produces another two ATP molecules, and therefore you'll end up with four ATP molecules. Let me just show you that. So since we have 2 and 2, so this is one of the two, and this is the other, so therefore we have four ATP molecules produced in this, just between these two steps, where we have triose and the eventual molecule that we make. So once these have been produced, the molecule now is no longer triose phosphate. It is now converted to pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon sugar. And because we had two of them, each of the two triose molecule go through the same thing to form two pyruvate molecules. So in a nutshell, when we look at this, we can see our products. What we have formed, we have basically used up two ATP molecules, two ATP at the beginning here to phosphorylate. Okay, so we have that and that. That's what we have used to do the first phosphorylation. And when you phosphorylate glucose 6, it helps it basically locks it inside the cytoplasm. Okay, it makes the glucose molecule can no longer leave the cell. It is sort of locked in because its structure changes, and so it can't easily get out. And at the same time, it is activated so that it is now easy for the glucose hexose to react, to go on with the reactions that subsequently occur, just by the fact that we phosphorylated it. So we've used two ATP molecules. So what did we produce? Eventually, we ended up producing four ATP molecules, and you saw them. So this is what we have produced. Okay, in one of these steps here, there and there. And then eventually we have produced two pyruvate molecules. Okay, so two pyruvate molecules. So that is what, and we shall be seeing now, why did we need these two pyruvate molecules? So that is the process that leads to the formation of, that leads to the breakdown of glucose molecules, and the process is called glycolysis. So that's it for glycolysis. See you in the next video where we look at the second stage of aerobic respiration.